You're not half the woman my mother is." The words from my daughter-in-law, Valerie, sliced through the air that evening as I served the dessert I'd made with so much love. A profound silence fell over the dining room. My heart pounded in my chest. Without thinking, I pushed my chair back and replied, "Then she can start paying your rent." My son, Robert, went completely pale. "Rent? What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide. At that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever. And this revelation was just the beginning of a story no one saw coming. My name is Shirley. I'm 70 years old. And on that night, I discovered that a mother's unconditional love could become her greatest weakness. For 6 months, I had been secretly paying the $800 monthly rent for the apartment where Robert and Valerie lived. I believed it was my duty to help my son through his financial struggles. I never imagined that while I was sacrificing my life savings, they saw me as a burden, as someone inferior they could humiliate without consequence. It had all started 6 months earlier when Robert came to my house, tears in his eyes, explaining that he had lost his job and they couldn't afford their rent. "Mom, it'll only be for a few months until I find something," he'd said with that broken voice that always disarmed me. Like any mother who loves her child, I didn't hesitate for a second. I dipped into my savings, the money I'd saved penny by penny over the years working as a seamstress, and started paying their rent without Valerie's knowledge. "It's our secret, Mom," Robert had pleaded. "I don't want Valerie to feel bad about depending on you." How naive I was to believe he was protecting his wife's pride when he was actually protecting his own image as a provider. While I was counting every dollar to help them, they lived as if nothing had changed. Going out to dinner, buying new clothes, and planning vacations I knew they couldn't afford. Dinner that night had been special. I'd spent all day cooking his favorite meal. Chicken with mushroom sauce, rice with vegetables, and that vanilla pudding he'd loved since he was a little boy. The table was set perfectly with the crystal glasses I'd inherited from my mother, and the silver cutlery I only used on special occasions. Valerie arrived in an elegant red dress and shoes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. From the moment they walked in, I noticed a different vibe. Valerie had that forced smile I knew so well, the one she used when she was about to do something unpleasant. Robert seemed nervous, avoiding my gaze and constantly fidgeting with his phone. During dinner, the conversation was tense. Valerie criticized everything: the food's temperature, my home's decor, even the air freshener scent in the living room. "Shirley, don't you think it's time you freshen this place up a bit?" she had commented with that condescending tone that so annoyed me. "My mom's house is so much more modern. She has those trendy minimalist pieces." I smiled, trying to maintain harmony, but inside, I felt my irritation mounting. I'd lived in that house for 30 years. Every object held a memory. Every corner told a story. When it was time for dessert, I thought we could finally enjoy a pleasant moment. I'd made the pudding with such care, remembering how Robert used to devour it as a child, telling me I was the best cook in the world. But instead of gratitude, I received those words that pierced my soul like thorns. "You're not half the woman my mother is." The impact of those words was like a slap to the face. I froze with the pudding spoon suspended in midair, feeling a lump of emotion swell in my throat. Valerie looked at me with a cruel smile, as if she'd been waiting all night for the perfect moment to hurt me. Robert lowered his head, avoiding my eyes. In that instant, I knew he had been in on his wife's plan. "Excuse me," I managed to choke out, my voice trembling, though I knew I'd heard her perfectly. Valerie leaned back in her chair with a false elegance, as if she were the owner of my house, and repeated the words with even greater cruelty. "You heard me, Shirley. My mother is a successful, independent woman who built her own empire. She's never needed anyone. She has her own company, her beach house in Florida, her trips to Europe. You just know how to cook and sew." Each word hammered at my heart. I thought of all the years I'd worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night sewing dresses for Sweet 16 parties, altering suits for grooms, embroidering tablecloths for other people's weddings, while I never had the chance to plan my own. I remembered the sleepless nights when Robert was small and had a fever, how I sold my few pieces of jewelry to pay for his college tuition, and how I worked double shifts so he could have everything he needed. "Valerie, please," Robert muttered weakly, without the strength to truly defend me. Those 2 words were worse than silence, because they confirmed that he agreed with his wife, that he had been part of this planned humiliation. My son, the same boy who once told me I was his hero, was now allowing me to be treated like a servant in my own home. "No, Robert, let me finish," Valerie continued in that high-pitched voice she used when she wanted to sound superior. "Your mother needs to hear the truth. My mother would never have allowed her son to live in this mediocrity." She made a dismissive gesture, pointing at my dining room, where so many beautiful memories were held. She would have helped us get something better. She wouldn't have kept us in poverty with her false kindness. It was at that moment that something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the injustice of her words, but the absolute ingratitude of someone who had been living off my generosity without knowing it. For 6 months, I had been the one paying for the roof over their arrogant heads. I had deprived myself of medicine for my arthritis to ensure they had a comfortable place to live. I rose slowly from my chair, feeling an adrenaline rush I hadn't felt in years. "All right, Valerie," I said with a calm that surprised me. "If your mother is so superior, if she's such a better woman than me, then I think it's time for her to assume the responsibilities a successful woman should have." Robert looked at me confused, but Valerie kept that smug smile on her face as if she'd won a battle. "Exactly, Shirley. I'm glad you finally understand your place in this family." "Oh, I understand my place perfectly," I replied, my voice growing firmer with each word. "And my place no longer includes paying the $900 a month for your apartment at 420 Hamilton Street, Unit 3. The silence that followed was so deep I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. Robert stood up so abruptly he knocked over his water glass. "What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide, looking at me as if I'd spoken a foreign language. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Valerie's arrogant smile had vanished completely. Now she looked at me with a mix of terror and confusion that gave me immense satisfaction. "The rent I've been religiously paying every month since February," I continued, savoring every second of their bewilderment. $900 that comes from my bank account on the 5th of every month, plus the $100 in additional fees the landlord charges for a direct deposit. $1,000 in total that I pay so you can live comfortably while you disrespect me." Robert collapsed into his chair as if his legs could no longer hold him. "But you told me you talked to the landlord, that he was giving you time to get the money," he stammered, his voice broken. Valerie looked at him with a fury I'd never seen before, as if he were to blame for ruining her moment of glory. "I lied," I admitted without a hint of remorse. "I lied because I thought I was helping my son. I thought it was temporary. I thought you would appreciate the sacrifice someday. But now I see that to you, I'm just a silly old woman who deserves to be humiliated." Valerie tried to regain her composure, but her voice had lost its arrogant confidence. "Surely I didn't know. Robert never told me that you were paying," she began to stutter. But I interrupted her, raising my hand. "I'm not interested in your excuses, dear. If your mother is as wonderful as you say, I'm sure she'll be happy to take on this responsibility. After all, a woman so successful and independent wouldn't have any problem paying for her daughter and son-in-law's rent, would she?" The irony in my voice was so evident that even Robert flinched. The atmosphere in the dining room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Valerie glanced back and forth between Robert and me as if she were quickly calculating the implications of what she'd just discovered. Robert's hands were trembling, and he had started to sweat. "Mom, why didn't you tell me the truth?" he finally asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you make me believe you'd worked something out with the landlord?" Robert's question echoed in the dining room like a painful echo. "I lied because you're my son, Robert. Because when you came to my house crying, telling me you had lost everything and didn't even have money for food, I couldn't stand by and watch the boy I raised, the man I love more than my own life, suffer." Valerie remained silent, but I could see her mind racing to process the implications of my revelation. The pink color from her expensive makeup had drained from her cheeks, and she looked ashen. Robert ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he'd made since he was a child when he was nervous or scared. I lied. I continued, my voice growing firmer. Because I thought it was temporary, because I believed that when you recovered financially and found a stable job, you would thank me. I never imagined that while I was depriving myself of medicine for my arthritis, while I stopped buying meat to save those $900 a month, you two were plotting how to humiliate me in my own home. Robert tried to interrupt me, but I raised my hand to silence him. No, now you're going to listen to me, Robert. For 6 months, I've been eating rice and eggs for dinner. I've been wearing the same pair of broken shoes because I didn't have money for new ones. You know what I did last week? I sold your father's wedding ring. That ring I'd kept as my most prized treasure just to pay your rent and have some food in my fridge. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. I sold the only physical memory I had of my husband, of the man who had loved me for 30 years, to support a couple who considered me inferior, mediocre, and unworthy of respect. Valerie finally found her voice, though it was small and shaky now. Surely I didn't know. Robert never told me that you were paying, but I cut her off with a look that could have melted steel. Of course you didn't know, dear, because your husband chose to lie to you too. He preferred for you to believe that he had earned the money on his own rather than admit he was depending on his mother. Mediocre. I spat out the word mediocre, with such venom that Valerie visibly recoiled. Robert finally exploded. Mom, I never wanted it to be this way. You insisted. I didn't ask you to sacrifice so much. His voice sounded desperate, like a child caught in a lie, but his words only fueled my fury. I insisted. I yelled, finally losing my composure. You came to my house sobbing like a 5-year-old. You told me you couldn't even afford bread, that Valerie was crying every night from the shame of not being able to pay the bills. What kind of mother would I have been if I had closed my door on you? The silence that followed was devastating. Robert looked at Valerie with a look of reproach that she returned with equal intensity. It was clear that there were secrets and lies on both sides, and that neither of them had been completely honest with the other. You know what hurts the most, Robert? I continued, feeling the tears streaming down my wrinkled cheeks. It's not the money. It's not the sacrifice. It's that for all these months, every time you came to visit, I saw contempt in your eyes. Valerie criticized my house, my food, my clothes, my manners, all while not knowing that my money was paying for her roof. And you? You just let her do it. Robert tried to approach me, but I took a step back. Mom, please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I cut him off sharply. The explanation just came out. Your wife believes I'm not half the woman her mother is. Well, then her mother can show what kind of woman she is by taking care of her responsibilities. Valerie finally found some courage to speak, though her voice still trembled. Surely my words were, she said. They were said in a moment of, I was upset about other things. I interrupted her with a bitter laugh. You were upset about having to eat at the home of the woman who pays your rent. Upset because you had to pretend to be cordial with someone you consider so inferior. The tension in the air was so dense, you could have cut it with a knife. Robert paced the dining room like a caged animal, while Valerie sat twisting a napkin between her trembling hands. You know what's the saddest part of all this? I continued, feeling a strange calm come over me. I really believed we were a family. When I married your father, Robert, I dreamed of having many children with grandkids running through this house with family dinners full of laughter and love. After years of trying to get pregnant, when you finally came, I thought God had given me the greatest gift in the world. Robert stopped and looked at me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I love you. You know I love you. Love isn't just words, son. Love is actions. It's respect. It's protection. When your wife insults me and you stay silent. When you let her humiliate me in my own home. When you lie to me to hide that you depend on me financially. That's not love. That's convenience. Valerie stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. That's enough. I'm not going to stand here and listen to this sermon. Robert, we're leaving now. Her voice had regained some of her usual arrogance, but I could see the panic in her eyes. No, Robert said firmly, surprising us both. We're not leaving until we sort this out. Mom, please sit down. We need to talk like adults. But I had already made my decision. There's nothing left to talk about, Robert. The cards are on the table. Your wife has made her feelings about me very clear, and you have shown that you agree with her. Starting tomorrow, I will no longer be paying your rent. If Valerie's mother is as superior as she says, I'm sure she'll find a way to help you. But Mom, you can't do that, Robert cried. And for the first time all night, I saw real terror in his eyes. We don't have the money. I was fired 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you after dinner. Robert's words hit the dining room like a bomb. You were fired 2 weeks ago? I repeated slowly, a new wave of betrayal washing over me. And you didn't tell me anything. You allowed your wife to humiliate me, knowing that you were completely dependent on me. My voice broke on the last word, not from sadness, but from a rage so profound that my hands were shaking. Valerie turned to Robert, her eyes blazing with fury. What? You were fired 2 weeks ago, and you didn't tell me? I've been spending money as if everything were normal while you. She couldn't finish the sentence. She put her hands over her face and began sobbing dramatically like an actress in a soap opera. Valerie, please let me explain, Robert began. But she cut him off with a gasp. Don't tell me to calm down. Just yesterday, I bought those $400 shoes. Last week, I booked the spa for my birthday. Robert, we're broke and you let me spend like an idiot. Her tears had completely ruined her makeup, and now she looked exactly like what she was. A desperate and terrified woman. I watched the surreal scene, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and pain. For months, I had carried the weight of supporting this couple, and now they were finally facing the reality of their situation. Robert looked defeated, his shoulders slumped and his face in his hands. You know what's the most pathetic part of all this, Robert? I said with a calm that surprised me. Even now, after discovering that you've been lying to me and humiliating me, my first instinct is to ask if you need help. That's what a mother does, son. That's what unconditional love does. Robert looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares. Mom, I lost my job because I was late 3 times in a row. Valerie had been sick and I had to take care of her. Take her to the doctor. And Valerie cut him off with a murderous look. I wasn't sick. I had appointments with my dermatologist for my beauty treatments. Don't use me as an excuse for your irresponsibility. The mask had fallen completely. The elegant, superior woman who had arrived at my house had disappeared, revealing someone vulgar and desperate. Beauty treatments? I asked in disbelief. Are you telling me my son lost his job because he had to take you to beauty treatments while I sold my jewelry to pay for your roof? A laugh so bitter it scared me escaped my throat. Robert approached me, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. Mom, please. I know I made mistakes. I know I failed you, but you can't abandon us now. We have nowhere to go. Valerie's parents are in Europe. And Valerie interrupted him again. My parents aren't in Europe. They're in town. You told me to tell you we were fine, so they wouldn't worry. One lie after another was being peeled back like the layers of a rotten onion. And how many jobs have you lost, Robert? I asked in a voice so low I could barely hear it. How many times have you lied to me? The silence that followed was deafening. Robert couldn't look me in the eyes, and Valerie had started to sob again, but this time it was more genuine, as if she had finally understood the magnitude of their situation. 3 jobs in the last 2 years, Robert finally admitted, his voice broken. I always found excuses. I always told you it was temporary, that companies were downsizing. He paused and looked at me with those eyes that were once my whole world. Mom, I have a problem. I think I have a real problem. For the first time all night, I felt something akin to compassion. My son wasn't just a liar. He was someone who needed professional help. But compassion didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't heal the wounds his words and his wife's words had opened in my heart. Robert, I said slowly, admitting you have a problem is the first step, but I can't keep being your safety net while you do nothing to change. I can't keep sacrificing my well-being to maintain a life based on lies. Valerie stood up abruptly, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her red dress. This is ridiculous, Shirley. You're his mother. Mothers don't abandon their children. My mother would never do this to me. The arrogance had returned to her voice like a defensive armor. Your mother has never had to deal with this because you've never told her the truth, I replied with an icy calm. And you're right about one thing, Valerie. Mothers don't abandon their children. But I'm not abandoning my son. I'm stopping him from using me. Robert approached me and took my hands in his. They were cold and trembling. Mom, I promise I'm going to change. I'm going to get help. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to make things right this time. Just give me one more chance. I looked at those hands once so small that I'd held when he learned to walk. When he was afraid of the dark. When he needed comfort after a nightmare. Robert, how many last chances have I given you? How many times have you made me the same promise? He couldn't answer because we both knew the answer. I had lost count of the times we'd had this very conversation. Of the broken promises and crushed hopes. Your lease is up next month, I announced, gently pulling my hands from his. You have 30 days to find a solution. After that, I will no longer be responsible for your housing. Valerie stormed toward the door. Let's go, Robert. I'm not staying here to be humiliated by a woman who doesn't understand what family means. But Robert didn't move. Valerie, you can go if you want. I need to talk to my mother. His voice had a firmness I hadn't heard in years. And for a moment, just for a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man he could have been. Valerie stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Robert's words. She turned slowly, her expression a mix of disbelief and pure fury. You're asking me to leave after everything I've sacrificed for this marriage? Her voice had become shrill, almost hysterical. And she gesticulated with her hands as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Hello, Robert. Yes, sir. It is complicated, but I'm starting to understand that my mother deserves to be happy, even if that means big changes in our lives. That's a very mature response, Michael replied with approval. I'll tell you something, Robert. I have 3 kids, all adults, and it took them years to understand that their parents are complete people with their own needs and desires, not just eternal providers of support and resources. Robert looked at me in surprise. It was clear he hadn't expected Michael to be so direct yet so understanding at the same time. Mr. Jenkins, Robert continued, can I ask you what your intentions are with my mother? Michael chuckled softly. That's a fair question. My intentions are to get to know the woman the girl I fell in love with 40 years ago became. My intentions are to show her beautiful places, to introduce her to my kids, to cook for her, to listen to her stories, and perhaps if we both decide we want to build a deep friendship or something more. And if things don't work out as you expect, Robert asked, then what? Then we will have had a beautiful adventure. We will have closed a chapter that was left open for decades, and your mother will have had a well-deserved vacation in Washington. There's no pressure, Robert. No unrealistic expectations. Just 2 older people giving themselves a chance to rediscover joy. Robert visibly relaxed. Thank you for being so honest, sir. Call me Michael, please. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to speak with your mother alone for a moment. Robert nodded and walked to the living room, giving me privacy for my phone call. How do you feel after talking to him? I asked Michael once we were alone. I feel good. He seems to be a young man going through a moment of growth. That speaks well of how you raised him, Shirley. Children who never face difficulties never learn to be resilient. His words reassured me more than I expected. Michael, are you sure you want to involve yourself in your peaceful life with a woman who has so much family drama? Surely, my dear, We all have family drama at our age. One of my sons got divorced last year and moved back into my house with his 2 small kids. My daughter is having a midlife crisis and calls me crying every Tuesday. My youngest son is struggling with a video game addiction that's affecting his marriage. He laughs softly. Family drama is a part of life. The difference is how we handle it and how you're handling it with clear boundaries and with firm love. And by always remembering that your kids are adults responsible for their own decisions and consequences. That's something you seem to be learning to do as well. After hanging up with Michael, Robert and I continued talking late into the night. He told me more details about his therapy, about how he was learning to identify behavioral patterns he had repeated for years without realizing it. You know what was the hardest thing to accept in therapy? He asked me as we drank a second cup of coffee. What? That it wasn't just that I was lazy or immature. It was that I had developed an emotional addiction to being rescued. Every time someone solved a problem for me, every time I was given money or pulled out of a tight spot, I felt a kind of euphoric relief. It was like a drug. His words hit me hard. And how are you supposed to break that addiction? By facing the consequences of my actions without seeking rescue. When I lost my last job, my first instinct was to come running to you with a sad story. But this time, instead, I slept in my car for 3 days until I got the cleaning job. You slept in your car? I asked with automatic maternal concern. Yes. And it was one of the most important experiences of my life. For the first time, I truly understood what it means to not have a safety net. What it means for my actions to have real consequences. He looked me directly in the eyes. Mom, during those 3 nights, I thought a lot about you. I thought about all the times you had to choose between your needs and mine, and you always chose mine. That's what mothers do. Robert. No, Mom. That's what mothers who haven't learned to set healthy boundaries do. And that's what children who have never learned to be responsible adults do. He leaned forward. The therapist helped me understand that by constantly rescuing me, you were unintentionally depriving me of the opportunity to grow. His words hurt me, but they also freed me. For years, I had felt guilty every time I considered saying no to Robert. Every time I thought about putting my needs first. Now I understood that my generosity had actually been a way of controlling him, of keeping him dependent on me. So what happens now? I asked softly. Now I'm going to prove first to myself and then to you that I can be a responsible adult. I'm going to pay my own bills. I'm going to make my own decisions. I'm going to face my own problems. And when you come back from Seattle, if you decide to come back, I'm going to be a son you can be proud of. And if I decide to stay in Seattle? Robert smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine joy in his smile instead of manipulation. Then I'll be happy for you. I'll visit you when I can. I'll call you every week, and I'll live my own life, knowing that my mother is finally living hers. The day of my departure dawned with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper promises of adventures to come. Robert arrived early to take me to the airport, and for the first time in years, there was no tension between us. He had brought flowers, a small bouquet of white daisies that I knew were my favorite, and a sealed letter. Don't open it until you're on the plane, he said with a shy smile. It's something I needed to say to you, but it's easier for me to write than to speak. During the drive to the airport, we talked about everyday things, the weather, the news, his plans for the week. It was a normal conversation between a mother and son, something we hadn't had in years. There were no pleas, no drama, no guilt, just a quiet conversation between 2 adults who loved each other, but finally understood healthy boundaries. Mom, he said when we arrived at the airport, I want you to know that no matter what happens in Seattle, this has already been worth it. What do you mean? Seeing you like this, excited, nervous, happy, I haven't seen you shine this way in years. He helped me take my suitcase out of the car, a suitcase I had carefully packed with my best dresses, including a new coral pink one I had bought especially for this trip. At the airport, Robert walked me to the security gate. When it was time to say goodbye, We hugged with an intensity we hadn't shared since he was a little boy. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Have fun. Fall in love. Be happy. You deserve it more than anyone in the world. I love you too, son. And I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Once on the plane, I opened Robert's letter with trembling hands. His handwriting, which had always been messy, looked more mature, more careful. "Mom," it began, "during these past few days, I've been thinking about all the times you were a hero without me noticing. When you worked double shifts to pay for my school books, when you sold your new sewing machine to buy me a bicycle, when you pretended not to be hungry so I could eat more, when you stayed up all night taking care of me when I was sick. All those moments of silent love that I took for granted. Now I understand that being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It means loving enough to teach independence. It means being brave enough to let go when it's time. Thank you for finally loving me enough to let me grow up. Fly high, Mom. Literally and figuratively. With all my love and respect, Robert. P.S. Michael is a lucky man to be meeting the most extraordinary woman in the world." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I put the letter back in my purse. Through the plane window, I could see the clouds stretching out to infinity, and for the first time in decades, I felt that my future was just as infinite. Michael was waiting for me at the Seattle airport with a bouquet of yellow roses and a smile I recognized immediately, even though he had more wrinkles and his hair was completely white. When he saw me, his face lit up with the same joy I remembered from our college days. "Shirley," he said when we hugged, "you're even more beautiful than I remembered." The days that followed were like living in a dream. Michael took me to see the Pacific coast where, for the first time in my life, I could see the ocean stretching out to the horizon. He introduced me to his kids who welcomed me with a genuine warmth that moved me deeply. His youngest daughter, Carmen, said, "Dad hasn't smiled like that since Mom died. Thank you for bringing back his joy." Michael cooked for me every night elaborate dinners that we savored on his deck while watching the sunset. I'm not a retired engineer. I'm just Michael, the man who fell in love with a brilliant girl 40 years ago and never forgot her. His words went straight to my heart because they expressed exactly what I felt with him. I wasn't Robert's sacrificial mother. I wasn't Charles's widow. I wasn't the tired seamstress. I was simply Shirley, a woman with stories to tell, dreams to chase, and love to give. At the end of my month in Seattle, Michael made me a proposal that changed my perspective on what was possible at 70. "Shirley, I don't want this to end. I know it's crazy. I know we're just getting to know each other again after so many years. But I want you to consider moving to Seattle. Not to get married immediately, not to live together if you don't want to, but to give us the chance to build something beautiful at this stage of our lives." My first instinct was to think of all the reasons why it was impossible. My house, my few friends, my life in my hometown. But then I thought of Robert, of his letter, of his words about flying high. I thought of Valerie, who had probably never truly respected me. I thought of all the years I had lived for others, putting my own dreams on hold. What if things don't work out? I asked. Then we will have had a beautiful adventure. But surely, what if they do work out? What if after a lifetime of putting others first, you finally have the opportunity to be completely happy? That night, I called Robert to tell him about Michael's proposal. His response surprised me and filled me with pride. "Mom, are you happy with him?" "Happier than I've been in decades. He treats me well. He respects me. He makes me feel valuable every day." "Then stay. Build the life you deserve. I'll be fine. In fact, I'll be better knowing that you're finally living for yourself." 6 months later, I was packing my most cherished belongings in my old house, getting ready to move to Seattle permanently. Robert helped me with the entire process, demonstrating a maturity and responsibility that filled me with hope for his future. "You know what the most ironic part of all this is?" he said to me as we packed up the family photos. "What?" "That by letting you go, I feel like I've finally gotten you back. Not as the mother who constantly rescues me, but as the extraordinary woman you always were, but whom I never bothered to truly get to know. As I write this story from Michael's deck, watching the Pacific Ocean, and waiting for him to come back from the market where he's gone to buy ingredients for the dinner we will cook together, I reflect on all that has changed. Robert is successfully building his own life. He got a promotion at his job. He moved to a better apartment, and is dating a woman who challenges him to be a better person instead of enabling his dependency. Valerie, he told me, married an older man who can maintain her lifestyle, which is probably for the best for everyone. And me, I finally learned that it's never too late to be happy. I learned that self-love isn't selfishness, but the foundation for being able to love others in a healthy way. I learned that a 70-year-old woman can have adventures, can fall in love, can start over. Michael and I got married last month in a small ceremony on the beach with his kids and Robert as witnesses. Robert cried throughout the entire ceremony, but they were tears of joy. I never thought I'd see my mother marry for love, he told me afterward. I always assumed your marriage to Dad had been just for convenience and family. Now, when I look back at that terrible night when Valerie humiliated me in my own home, I see it as the greatest gift I could have received because it was that humiliation that finally woke me up. It was that humiliation that showed me I deserved more. It was that humiliation that gave me the courage to chase the happiness I thought I had lost forever. And you? What would you do if life gave you a second chance to be completely happy? Would you have the courage to take it no matter what others think? Because believe me, it's never too late to start over.